And another insight that I have is that we have been approached by some of the largest unsolicited nickel manufacturers and largest auto manufacturers. And the first thing I told them, Dylan, was that
Tesla's future, its master plan part 3, is all about scaling sustainable energy to massive civilization level scale. This just is not possible unless the raw material Tesla needs is extracted from the earth at a slightly faster pace. We all remember this.
Well, I'd just like to emphasize, any mining companies out there, please mine more nickel. Okay. Wherever you are in the world, please mine more nickel. Tesla will give you a giant contract for a long period of time if you mine nickel efficiently and in an environmentally sensitive way.
So has anything changed since then? We know Elon is open to getting into mining, but how likely is this? The reality is this is far bigger than just Tesla. I mean, do we really want to be reliant on Russia for nickel, who is the world's third biggest producer? Today, we'll hear from John Lee, the CEO of FLYN Nickel Mining Corp, who's also a chartered financial analyst. He's spent the last 20 years in the mining industry and has raised over $150 million for mining exploration. He's also owned several Canadian nickel projects since 2009. You guys know I don't ask for early likes, but today I'm going to. So before you forget, please drop a like below to thank John for taking the time and to ensure we can keep bringing on great guests for exclusive insight. Nickel is critical to the future of the Semi, the Cybertruck, and the Roadster, and of course, 4680 production for the foreseeable future. The timestamps will be below. Enjoy. So I've read that right now we only have one active nickel mine in the United States. Now, we've also heard that Talon Metals is supposed to come online in 2026. Tesla has a deal for part of that supply. My question is, though, is there a pipeline built up of mines in the US or even maybe in North America that are set to come online over the next few years? And why is there only one nickel mine in the United States right now?
for nickel, the mine you refer to is Eagle, and that was by Lundin Mining. That's a Canadian company. Actually, the founder of Lundin, Lucas, just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And so that mine was acquired about 7 years ago, I recall. The total nickel production out of the United States will not even sustain a month of Tesla car production. It's absolutely negligible. But even in total, if you look at, say, something I'm very familiar with is gold. 90% of the gold produced in the United States is Nevada. So there are only a very, very handful of states that support mining. And because you have a lot of the conservationists and the state level, they're not support. The county doesn't support mining. The state doesn't support mining. Then you're not even getting through the state level to go to the federal level. So I think United States rank. I think it's maybe mid-tier, maybe the bottom 2/3 in terms of ease of permitting in the global chart. And so Talon is, I believe they're in Michigan, and Michigan is not far. I believe the project from the Duluth project, and that's operated by Antofagasta out of Chile. Michigan that has a very rich mining history in the past. That's why they call the rusty iron belt. However, I don't think there's any more production of metals of significant amount from Michigan. My understanding is Michigan is not right now and is governed by a Democratic state. It's not one of the more friendly states that welcomes mining.
To your knowledge, does the United States have the resources? Like, do we have the nickel deposits and it's just a permitting issue? We can't access it, or we don't even really have the resources to be a significant player?
Right. United States is blessed. You do have a very rare occurrence sulphide. So sulphide is being, because I said, remember up to 10 years ago, all the nickel came from sulphide. And sulphide, they don't just happen everywhere. You have sulphide from Russia and Australia and China that account for most. United States do have nickel reserves. Again, it's in that Duluth complex in Minnesota. So you have Polymed that owns, that's by owned majority by Glencore, and then you have Antofagasta. So that area has a lot of nickel. I think I don't know what the reserve, but it certainly would be one of the major nickel sulfide district in the world. It will rank top 10 in terms of reserve. It's a very famous district.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
The question then is how can you guys move that? I would say if you were to discover a mine today, just to get through the feasibility technical, because you got to spend 3 to 4 year drilling, and that's going to cost something around $30 to $40 million. And then concurrently, you can start that permitting process, going to take about 3 years. So just the technical studies and the permit is going to take you up to maybe 5 to 7 years. And then construct the mine, especially today's environment with COVID and access and supply chain issues, you're going to take about 3 years. So you're looking at altogether 10-year window. Even if the Biden administration were to approve polymet, which is next to Duluth, it's in Duluth. So if you approve both polymet and twin metals, which is Antofagasta, you're looking at maybe another 3 to 5 years before any nickel come out of the ground in the United States.
Mm-hmm. So do you expect a significant nickel shortage for the EV industry over the next 3 to 7 years?
Nobody has the crystal ball. I mean, Dylan, if you look at consensus from, say, McKinsey or Goldman Sachs, or some of the nickel experts, it's always linear, right? It's always like +5 or -5% supply or deficit. If you look at, say, it's going to be a shortfall or it's going to be oversupply, you always want to now analyze from supply and from demand. I can tell you from supply perspective that nickel supply has been fairly steady. And in fact, until this year, 2021, nickel supply went down 4%. Production went down 4% from 2020. And secondly, nickel sulphide production has been in steady decline in the last 10 years. So if you look at all the sulphide increases in the last 10 years, it's all strictly from nickel laterite, which has doubled the nickel production in the last 10 years. And that's why you see nickel prices has been going from $4 to $10 in the last decade. And that further discouraged further exploration and mining constructions of the sulphide project, which is a lot harder to find and it's more expensive to discover. And so therefore, I don't see a lot of new nickel coming on stream, despite there's a blip on nickel. So even if nickel prices will double because of the length it takes, it's going to be 5 years before you see more nickel coming on stream. Now, talk about on the demand side. I mean, demand has been fairly steady. So the demand from EV for nickel is gone from 0 to currently at around 5 to 6%. That grew just in the last 3 to 4 years. Well, the interesting thing is, though, even though 5% may be insignificant, but you're really looking at a very tightly supply. You're looking at a well-structured market. So you have an entrant that goes into this and that just disrupted the market, even at a 5% market share, because these guys are price inelastic, Dylan. They will go in because a car requires about 100 pounds of nickel at around $10 nickel today. It's $1,000. It's kind of like uranium. They don't care whether it's 1,000 or 1,200. But that 20% delta is a big difference for a stainless steel producers, but it's not significant for the battery manufacturers. So that 5%, and so that really sort of make nickel broke out of that $10 to $5 trading band in the last 10 years. And when that band broke, you saw the action, nickel went up 4-fold in the span of a week. And part of that reason we can discuss is that when Elon Musk 2 years ago say, mine so much nickel, don't worry about the price. I think that really got some speculators also coming to the picture. So I would say it's a combination of the fundamentals and also the outlook forecast for the EV demand on nickel that drove the nickel price. I don't have a forecast on the nickel price, but I think that the risk, the upside definitely exceeds the downside, because I don't see nickel go down below $10. Even with the current, regardless of the future of EV. Now, the question is to how high nickel price would go. I never imagined in my life. Well, nobody imagined when nickel went up 4 times, is that it will really depend on how much nickel is going to go into the batteries. The projection of auto growth in the 2030, and some people pegged at 100 million cars, I don't think it's going to be that much. So that's one factor. And you have people say, populations go down 30% or up 20%. And then you'll have the discussion about the EV penetration. Some say 20, some say 40. And then towards the end, within the EV realm, you look at a different battery technology. Just 3 years ago, nickel was 20 or 10%, but now nickel's 80% on the cathode, and that might change. And at the same time, you also have LFP, which is iron phosphate batteries. If you're going to project on a 50% EV penetration, 100 million autos by 2030, and exclusively using MMC 811 nickel 80% content for all the EVs, there's not enough nickel to go around, and that's just going to accelerate the other technology like hydrogen cells that might come in 5 years or 10 years.
Right.
I don't
Yeah,
have
that
the
makes
crystal
sense.
ball. I just think that the upside is a lot more than downside.
Gotcha. To help us better contextualize what a big nickel contract actually looks like as we see Tesla make new deals, what do typical nickel contracts usually look like? You know, supply, dollar value, duration. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Dylan, in a nickel contract, nickel is nickel is trading on the common commodity exchange. So you have there's really 2 or 3 major exchanges. There's one in China, and there's one in the United States. It's COMEX, and that trades the platinum, palladium, gold, and silver, and copper. Nickel is primarily traded on the London Metals Exchange, and that is owned by the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. Just real quick, for example, I don't know if you for regular investors, it's no different from buying a gold contract or silver contract. So silver contract is 5,000 ounces, a nickel contract 6 ton. So a ton of nickel right now is trading around $22,000. When you do a contract so that's really for speculators. But if you're doing a contract, for example, Tesla with say Vale, it's all about quantity, price, and duration. And usually price is pegged on the London Metals Exchange. Now, there's quite a bit of nuances, Dylan, depending on, like, for example, iron ore or uranium. They could further specify on the quality. As I mentioned, the standard product is 98.8% pure. But if the Tesla says, I don't need that purity, but I want this intermediary of which they can shortcut the process to produce the highest purity. So, that could be some nuances. And another point is, usually, I think for nickel, Tesla is basically going to say, I'm going to take all. It's what they call the take or pay, which means that the buyer is committed to buying that much nickel. For Talon, of course, is completely different. I don't believe the contract is binding, and that would be subject to a lot of contingencies, such as whether you can get the nickel out of the mine, if you can the project permitted, etc. And I believe typically it's a very soft MOUs where Talon will say, if I produce, I will give it to you. And the Tesla say, if I need nickel, I will buy from you. But however, for Tesla to be extending this gesture to Talon, of which there's not a lot to gain for Tesla right now, because there's absolutely no certainty of where the nickel is going to be supplied, shows that Elon is willing to promote nickel and to sort of lend a hand to try to get the process through. I would say, what Elon is doing is quite unusual, because Elon usually would tying a contract with, say, the battery providers, right? They would just say, look, I need this much battery, MNC 811, I need this back from LG or Panasonic. And whatever that they do is their business. So what Elon is doing is kind of like Apple when the speculators came into cobalt and drove cobalt price tenfold from $5 or $15 a pound to $50 a pound in 2 months. So Apple, kind of like Tim Cook, is kind of like foresight, like Elon, is say, hey, I'm not going to rely on Panasonic to make sure that they can secure their supplies, because even if Panasonic were to force majeure their contract with Tesla, still Tesla is going to suffer the consequence of the monetary damage that may not be able to be assessed because the batteries don't show up. They got big problems. So Tesla, in a way, is doing Panasonic a favor, because all Tesla is going to do is give that nickel to whoever they're designated, whether it's Foxconn or whatever. It's kind of like Apple buying cobalt to give to Foxconn to produce their Apple phones. So it's a foresight. It's just to make sure that they're going down the supply chain to make sure that they're able to secure all the critical elements required to get that car out of the door.
Now, is it true that most nickel providers in this space may be more willing to work with Tesla and negotiate with them because of their strong demand and their commitment to the future, whereas maybe they're not so sure about other legacy OEMs? Or is that something that Tesla bulls have just made up over the years, that negotiating power?
Dylan, nickel is a fairly liquid product. Look, it's all about buyer and seller. So naturally, if you have a credited buyer looking for a long-term contract, that's what the seller prefers. But what the seller is looking at is It's all about price. Again, price, quantity, and duration. So of course, I would rather have a buyer that's willing to say, John, give me all the nickel you get. I will pay you whatever the spot price is, and I will take all you can produce, and I will sign a fixed contract for 10 years. A pound of nickel you produce, I will buy it. Everybody loved that. But whether it's coming from Tesla or GM or a spoon manufacturer, they really don't give that regard. However, my gut feeling is because Elon's thirst for nickel, I think their contract would have a lesser penalties for maybe nickel producers that cannot meet the demand versus less penalties for supply for the buyer side, where the buyers might not be able to buy the nickel they want. Like, I'll give you an example, right? Maybe Elon will say, you know what, if you just produce 95% nickel instead of 99%, which is what I need, I will give you some slacks. If you're supposed to give me, say, 10,000 tons per month, and you only come out with 9,500, maybe Elon say, I'm okay. I don't force you to go to the market and try to make you whole. So, I mean, these contracts are highly complex. So my gut feeling is Elon, I think, is not going to be as fastidious in their demand from the supplier side, because he needs all he can get, right? Versus somebody who may be more stringent on what they ask out of the suppliers. But all in all, I think, keep in mind also, Dylan, that Elon maybe also is open to what they call the hedging. So, like, for example, if the outlook for nickel, going back to the contract, if the outlook for nickel is bullish, it's what they call the contango. So there's actually nickel price looking out a year or even 2 years out. So Elon may be saying that, look, I am willing to buy nickel. If you look at nickel 2 years out, today's nickel is around $9.50. I think nickel 1 or 2 years out, maybe $13 or $14. So Elon may be saying that, hey, I'm bullish on nickel. I want nickel. So Elon may be going to the supplier, say, they will be benchmarking on today's price. It's not typical right now, but I could see that scenario play out as nickel price go up and the suppliers, as the suppliers are willing to commit. If Elon were to do that, then the suppliers will have to. Then the price is locked in. The supplier will have to deliver nickel at these set prices.
So now, hypothetically, let's say Elon does decide he's not getting nickel fast enough and he's going to take matters into his own hands. In your professional opinion, what would be the best way to speed up that process? Would it be Tesla buying a mine and setting up operations? Would it be focusing on a refining process because there's enough supply and that they just need to refine it? Or would it be both? Like, how would you see that playing out?
Dylan, there's more refining capacity than there's feed available. So the bottleneck is not on the processing side, especially on nickel sulphide, as I mentioned to you, because sulphide production is going down for the last 10 years. I think it's maybe 30% from it was 10 years ago. I don't see nickel laterite production to go up because people cannot, especially buy nickel from laterite because of the high carbon emissions. So, and your question is, how can Elon secure his nickels in the future? I think he's doing everything that he can. First of all, he is signaling to the miners, you need to mine as much nickel. Don't worry about today's nickel price. And secondly, I think he's giving a lot of latitudes and approaching nickel miners and expressing their interest to help. And I think if Elon were to lobby the states, federal, and community levels, I think it will certainly help. And then also Elon buying and securing supplies and assure nickel miners that they can mine all that Elon will buy all the nickel that they can produce. Like, for example, we are familiar with Vale's. Like, for example, because Elon could be buying 5 or 10% of all of the nickel Vale's output for nickel. Now, all of a sudden, the 10% that Vale used to sell the other guys, they're going to be shortchanged. And the other guys might not know because the other guys are on a fixed contract. But sooner or later, when these guys are calling Vale and say, I want to buy, I want this much nickel next month, they might not get it, Dylan. Then they have to resort to go to the London Metals Exchange to buy that nickel in the metals exchange. Well, I mean, there's only certain fixed amount of nickel inventory in the London Metals Exchange to deliver nickel. Once the inventory run low, the only way to get more nickel is to go up on the price. And that's going to draw a lot of volume, and speculators going to come in. And interestingly, Dylan, I will share you a couple of insights. So I think, answer your question, I think Elon is doing as much as he can, because even if Elon were to buy a mine, I don't think it's a mining company like ours can move the process any faster, even if we have more money. So it's not something strictly as a function of money. If you look at 4 months ago in March, when the nickel price on the London Metals Exchange went from $10 a pound to $50 a pound in a week, and that's unprecedented for nickel, which is quite a liquid market. Because liquid, if you look at nickel, it's about 5 billion pounds of nickel trade, 5 billion pounds of nickel. So that's about $50 billion a year. So that's a quite liquid market.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest, one of the two biggest guys on the long side on the LME in March was Volkswagen and Goldman Sachs. And Goldman Sachs typically are not a big time speculator. So I would say maybe you have some really, I mean, these are well-established players. These are not Citadel, right? Not like hedge funds. And so you can tell that there are some sticky buyers that are going into the London Metals Exchange, which is the last resort if they want to go, because they're bidding up prices, shooting themselves in the foot. And another insight I have is that we have been approached by some of the largest unsolicited nickel manufacturers and largest auto manufacturers. And the first thing I told them, Dylan, was that, are you sure you're going to continue this conversation? Because the earliest that we can get nickel out of the ground will be 2026. And they were relieved to hear that. They said everybody else they talked to had a production timeline of 2030, 2029. That, again, is an indicator that tells me that they already had a conversation with Glencore. They already conversation with Vale and BHP. These are the three giants, and the Russians. And another point I want to point out is some auto manufacturers and battery manufacturers, they were very adamant about not sourcing any supply. Our supply, like our shareholders and our partners on equipment, construction, not to have zero content from Russia and from China. And part of that reason is, Dylan, as you mentioned, that that Biden administration has dished out a lot of grants. There are a lot of hundreds of billions available across the food chain. Not much money has come out, but they have a very stringent requirement. And so therefore, a lot of these battery providers, especially want to go into penetrate in the North American space, their choices of nickel is very limited. They cannot go to laterite. They cannot go to some of the Asian and East Asia countries. And there's only 3 or 4. It's almost an oligopoly situation. On the sulphide suppliers, 4 to 5 countries account for 80% of that. And the BHP, which is coming out of Australia, they are going up to Canada to buy nickel mines and outbidding everybody else by a factor of 5. So the stock went from $1 to $5. It's called Noron. It's another mining company. So you are seeing that these guys are foreseeing a very short supply 25 years from today, and they're going to buy miners that could only, if potentially that can supply their nickel needs 5 years from now. So I think all of this indicator tells you that these auto manufacturers are really looking forward. I would say the nickel supply in the next 2 to 3 years is very, very tight, and that they have exhausted these options and they're looking into far way out. And just by that logic, Dylan, I believe that the contract that probably Elon signed with Vale probably took an arm and a leg out of Tesla, meaning that they must have been far superior than everybody else offered for Vale to be willing to give up that quota to be dedicated to Tesla.
Well, thank you for that, John. That was actually some awesome insight. So I appreciate that. That's good stuff. Just a quick, even just a 1 number answer, one last hypothetical. If Tesla were to buy a mine, what would be the initial CapEx to get something like that up and running? Are we talking 500 million? Are we talking 3 billion? What would it look like?
Depending on the production throughput, I can give you some concrete numbers. If you're looking at, say, a mine that produces around minimum 20 million pounds a year, which is a medium to small production scale. A mine that can supply on an annual basis of what a quarter of Tesla's need will cost you about $1 billion. Dylan. If Tesla want to buy a mine of size of which that would supply 1 million Tesla production, 1 million, you're going to need $5 billion minimum, Dylan, to get you 1 million Tesla. Battery required. However, you might want to cut that number by half. If half of the, like for example, like you talk about the variance on the LFP, which require no nickel. So then maybe you're looking at 50. So maybe $2.5 billion or $3 billion that Elon's going to need to build a mine to supply all his nickel need today.
Got it. Now, John, I know you're somewhat of an M&A expert in the nickel space. So my question for you is, do you foresee Tesla buying, whether it be mining company, refining company, and maybe more importantly, would that even benefit Tesla, or they just need to keep supplying and not really take that next leap?
If I'm Elon, that will probably be my last resort. Nickel sulphide is in Russia, China, Australia, and Canada. Only those 4 countries. There are less than 30 nickel mining companies that are listed on the common stock exchange. And if you look at, I would go on a limb and say there are maybe less than 10 or 15 good qualified mining projects in jurisdiction sulphide. That's not in Russia and China. So if Elon were to buy a mine, I think that's gonna triple the price of all the other mines that are still out in the market. And secondly, it says that Elon then have to recruit all those talents to run a project. So most likely, I think Elon's going to continue to try to secure additional supply from Glencore, from BHP, and these are there's 3 or 4. They might. I mean, Elon might buy a nickel primary nickel mining producer like Sherritt, for example. But Sherritt has a lot of production in Cuba, which again, it would be problematic. So it's really in a bind. I think Elon has done as much as he could. I cannot see Elon go on a limb and buy a nickel producer, but Elon might invest. That's another possibility, is like he did with Twitter, to invest in a company like Glencore or BHP so that he could have some influence on securing their offtake.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of what I was, just presuming or expecting may happen in the future. John, where can our audience find you, find your company, and stay in tune with all of these, updated insights on what's going on in the nickel space?
If you're looking to invest in EV space, it may pay to look at their common denominator, which is nickel, because it's getting very, very competitive with BYD. I think you read yesterday that's exceeding the Tesla volume. Yet to be verified. So there's a lot of nickel, and if you look at the common denominator, I think nickel is one of the better bets, because lithium, there's abundant lithium, and I think nickel is going to be around for at least for the next 5 years before the advent of its replacements, and that's validated by the auto manufacturers and battery guys that we're talking to that are asking for nickel 5 years from today. And there's a lot of information like a Nickel Institute. And if you like to know my outlook on nickel, it's just my general thoughts. I'm pretty active on Twitter. You can look up John Lee Battery Metals. So that is my handle. Or if you can go to flynickel.com to learn a bit more about our company. And we do have a lot of information, such as a technical study that outlines the different cost, CapEx, and OpEx. And so you get a bit of an idea on sort of the process of we have lots of documents and hundreds of pages, or there are guys that are sort of that are just trying to get introduced to nickel for the first time. So the website is flynickel.com, and my handle is John Lee at Battery Metals on Twitter. And finally, we're actually listed company on the Toronto Stock Exchange. It's FLYN, and then on the OTC that's FLYNF.
Okay, beautiful. I will put all of that in the description below so everyone watching can go find that. And John, honestly, thank you very much for taking the time to talk. I have honestly learned a lot, so this has been super helpful.
Dylan, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate the invitation.